Hello, my name is Kelsey, and I would like to welcome you to tonight's LPL Showdown. Tonight, Razleplasm will cover the face-off of his favorite teams in LPL, Invictus Gaming and Energy Pacemaker. I'll look into the grudge match between UZI and his former team, Starhorn Royal Club. DreXxiN will touch on Snake's first real test against Edward Gaming, and Froskurinn will break down the potential horror that is World Elite versus Master 3. So we're going to start out with Razleplasm discussing Energy Pacemaker versus Invictus Gaming.
Energy Pacemakers versus Invictus Gaming is going to be my favorite match to analyze. With EP coming back into the LPL, they've had a taste of the level of competition and reacted surprisingly well to it in the early game, but only if they got the picks that they wanted. With that being said, it became obvious that Energy Pacemakers still have a long way to go, as their mid-game shot calling and their bottom lane troubles still loom over them. IG, on the other hand, feel like the better EP. The lane IG will probably have the most trouble with seem to be top, but Pokemon has proven to be strong enough to hold his own against Amazing J. Also, he'll have the help of Cacao, which segues perfectly into the match of the game, and at the same time the strongest players of each team. Cacao versus Captain 57. Captain 57 is by far the strongest asset to EP, and his early game jungle rotation and gank path is what tend to get EP their wins. The onus will be on him to create early game opportunities with the hope that his team can be far enough ahead in the mid to late game to win out those late game team fights that they like to force. That isn't likely to happen though, as Captain 57 is more or less Cacao light, and the king himself will show up in person to show the captain how it's done. LPL is a shared preference, so expect an early grab or ban from the two, but it just feels like an uphill battle for EP, and regardless of how solid their picks and bans are.
Thanks, Raz. For the second best of two of the night, we have OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club. Even without Name showing up to play tonight, this is the most storied match so far this season. Last year, OMG and Starhorn had a nearly airtight head-to-head record, all the way down to the 3-2 World Semifinals victory for Starhorn Royal Club. Both of these teams retain a good chunk of their lineup from last year, and from last week's game seem to have held on to their snowballing identity. Even without UZI at the helm, Starhorn Royal Club tore Master 3 to shreds, and though they didn't hold up against LGD Gaming, their matches have a sense that this could be a strong squad with Name in the future. OMG has taken most of their games with early dominance on a lane-by-lane basis, with some creative team fighting and Zhonya's used to work around UZI's all-in tendencies, but they've kind of had less crisp synergy than they've had in the past with San. Though what really made Starhorn Royal Club and OMG's matches so interesting in the past was the jungle rivalry. Though the talent has really increased this year, we have to pay homage to Loveling and Insect because last summer they were probably the best junglers in LPL. Insect struggled on champions other than Rengar, LPL, and Kha'Zix, and it wasn't uncommon for OMG to ban two of those and pick one on blue side. A big part of Starhorn Royal Club's success at Worlds, then, was recognizing that OMG would repeat this tactic and Insect practicing off-meta picks in solo queue. With new powerful champions open in Season 5, however, OMG will probably stray away from this ban-out Insect strategy in favor of removing a pick like Gnar from the board, which Cola has had a lot of success on. Even so, LPL will probably remain a coveted pick, as it's a favorite of both teams. While OMG has targeted Starhorn's jungle, Starhorn made a point of abusing Cool's love of Twisted Fate. Most teams preferred to ban the high map pressure selection away from Cool, but Starhorn would kind of bait him into it, repeatedly gank his lane in the early levels to minimize his impact. Cool favors heavy roaming, and keeping him in lane was usually Starhorn's goal towards the latter half of the summer. The real matchup tonight, though, is definitely in the bottom lane. After UZI departed to OMG at the end of the transfer season, Zero took out his sadness on Facebook, kind of told fans that maybe if he had been a better support, UZI would have stayed. Though, because most of Zero's success in LPL has kind of come out of peeling for UZI on champions like Nami and Janna. But since then, Zero has come back to social media kind of with a renewed vengeance, and declared that Starhorn Royal Club has no specific plans for other teams, but they will definitely camp OMG's bottom lane hard. Zero's 2 Leona picks from last week doubled the amount of times he's ever played that champion in LPL, again going back to the way he liked to use to peel. However, this reflects his new bloodthirstiness, and it seems almost like he's been practicing this just with UZI in mind, you know, definitely dive that guy. Expect the entire gang to pay UZI multiple visits, but if everyone's in the bottom lane, that means OMG's top tier solo laners could well walk away with this game for free.
EDG versus Snake is a battle of polar opposites, basically. For most of us, Snake was slated to be a bottom of the barrel team, where Edward Gaming was about to, going to hover around the top. Snake's thrown a few people off guard, however, because they started the season 2-0. So, this actually ties both of the teams. Edward Gaming and Snake actually are entering the second week both with a 2-0 score. But now we get to see if it's a fluke or not, because basically we get to see if Snake is better than people have anticipated. One of the highlights of the match is going to be Flandre versus Koro. I think both of them qualified to be two of the most improved players within the region. Flandre's always been a strong force for Snake, but a lot of people tagged him as this sort of meta breaker, kind of, hipster-ish style player, just because he likes to play a lot of unusual and unorthodox picks. But this last weekend, he proved everybody wrong in a sense, just because his Irelia and Rumble play were both like really, really solid, and it dictates that he can play meta champions just as well as the unorthodox picks. Koro's going to be a really solid testing ground for him because he's greatly improved as well and is now a carry force with this team, both in lane and in team fights. And they have a somewhat similar champion pool in that they were both very good at Irelia in the last weekend. So the other determining factor is Snake liking to put their AD carry, who was Crystal this last week, on a strong late game marksman, as we saw with his Tristana play this last weekend. And they do that as kind of like an insurance policy, should their early snowball fail, so that they can scale in the late game and have a kind of like, an emergency backup there. The problem, though, is that EDG is all too familiar with late game. It kind of makes them a mismatch in terms of skill and playstyle, just because EDG's like just natural tendency tends to counter Snake's strategy, and they're usually careful enough that early snowballs aren't going to just throttle EDG's play. The other determining factor is largely that Edward Gaming has much more powerful Korean, they have a much more powerful Korean pair, whereas Snake has Beast and Ella, who relatively are unknown. If you look on the other end of the match, it's Rookie and Deft, who have a substantially more impressive pedigree. Realistically, EDG should take this matchup pretty easily 2-0, but Snake could upset. The thing is Snake's 2-0 victories entering this set versus EDG's 2-0 victories are a little bit different. Snake's victories are over Gamty and a shaky-looking World Elite. EDG have had the opportunity to show that they've been strong internationally in the past LPL, domestic tournaments and internationally and whatnot, even though they were a bit shaky at Worlds, whereas Snake hasn't really seen much play outside of third-party tournaments in LSPL. So, essentially, this matchup is going to be a much better testament on the team's ability and kind of dictate if their 2-0 was a hoax or not. So, we're going to see if they're actually a decent team, or, if they can only pull off their niche against weaker opponents.
Finishing up the night, it's going to be Masters 3 versus former sister team World Elite. Now the matchup here is interesting in where the power is weighted. M3 is boasting superstar talent in their solo lanes with Looper and Dade, while World Elite's primary carries are in the jungle with Spirit and their bot lane ADC with STYZ. Both these teams have had mixed results, but M3 is currently seated higher after the first week. Their victory entirely depended on Dade's ability to not counterpick himself into that mid lane. Not known for his lane phase, when given even footing, Dade more than makes up for his lack of early pressure for his efficiency with cooldowns in late game teamfights. It's just about getting him there. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for World Elite's carries Spirit and STYZ. Spirit has tried the gauntlet of styles to help carry World Elite, but has recently been leaning on a hyper carry mentality with picks like Rengar. STYZ, known for his lane-dominant style, has been struggling to find success on meta picks like Severe. Until World Elite can find the same synergy between these two as they did in their Demacia Cup finals match, this matchup will be rough. Featured player matchups, due to the skill difference in the lanes, will focus on the jungle, the current World Elite jungler Spirit versus former World Elite jungler Ruro. If Spirit decides to continue with picks like Riven and Rengar, this could be a clash of styles across from Ruro's supportive jungle pathing. Ruro certainly has more viable gank options with solo laners that outclass their counterparts, so we'll see if Spirit's limited options make him predictable and shut World Elite down before he can get STYZ off the ground, or if Dade decides to do World Elite a favor and go on vacation during draft phase. This matchup will answer questions about the middle-of-the-pack LPL teams and help flesh out M3's skill ceiling, but shouldn't be a showstopper unless you like watching car accidents. And that's your LPL Showdown.